All rolling. This week, the name on the marquee has got to be Alexandre the Great Volkanovski, who this past weekend, in front of 19,000 strong at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada, defended his UFC featherweight championship yet again by TKOing the great Yair Rodriguez in the third round. The official time came at 4:19 of round number 3. Mark, start us off. Give us your take of yet another phenomenal, flawless performance by Alexandre the Great.
I do have a take. Alexandre Volkanovski is really good. I don't know if anyone else has had that take yet, but I'm throwing it out there. Really, though, this guy is amazing. I loved the way he fought the whole fight. I loved how he came out constantly switching stances early. I think that gave Yair something to have to adjust to right away instead of letting Yair just open up with crazy shit where he could try to set a tone early. I think it kind of gave Yair pause to have to think about that. Then he caught the leg for the takedown pretty quick, like a minute and a half into the fight. And he is tough on top, man. He'll control you if you're not really battling to get up. And Yair did after a bit, but he went back a couple more times. He couldn't really went back down a couple more times. Couldn't really create any space to get Volk off him in that first round. Round 2, Yair did start to open up a bit more, but Volk is just so good at not getting hit. And then when he does get hit, you can't hurt him. And Yair did land like that one big counter right as Volk stepped in. But then next thing you know, it's to the ground again. And Volk is working for 3 minutes on top. He bloodied Yair. He did some damage, made him work, wore on him. And it was all Volk through those 10 minutes. And then even in round 3, the way, again, Yair started to get off a little bit. But I loved how Volk started closing the distance, and he kept changing the angle to kind of try to cut Yair off and crowd him just so Yair could not open up with those range strikes. He's just too good, man. He's got an answer for everything. He has such a grasp of every single aspect of the fight game. He's a smart fighter, and he looked fantastic in there. Yes, the headbutt happened, which was unfortunate. I don't want to ignore that because it actually looked like it knocked Yair pretty clean on the jaw. So I don't know how much of a factor that ended up being. Yair did seem to be moving completely fine after, like he was throwing jumping kicks and all that. And then he even landed probably his best combinations of the fight after that. So you'd think he was fine. But that was the point of the fight where he really landed a couple, and it seemed like he had Alex feeling some strikes for the first time. And then it truly felt like Alex was like, all right, like, you're going to hurt me now? Fuck this fight. We've been here long enough. I'm just going to end it. And he flipped a switch. Like, I know it's not quite that simple, and people laugh when you hear that, but, like, it really did look like that's what went on in Volk's mind. Like, he was playing in there, and then he was like, all right, I've had enough. And it started with a beautiful counter right that hurt Yair bad. He chased him to the cage, swinging body head, and then he just absolutely dumped him with that takedown. And he put a barrage on him. So it was really one of the all-time, like, flick a switch type finishes that I can recall seeing in a fight that was that high level. Just the way that he landed, charged, crowded him, then the way he dumped him with that takedown, poured it on. It was just like it went from a competitive fight to being over in like what felt like 20 seconds. So another absolutely dominant performance for Alexandre Volkanovski, the man who is in a lot of people's minds the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world right now, and he backs it up again.
Omar, give us your take of the techniques thrown by both of these men in this fight, and what in your estimation was the real difference maker in this contest?
Volkanovski is what, like 4'8"? Like, the man is extremely tiny, and yet he probably has some of the best distance management currently in the game. His ability to fight somebody significantly taller than him, stay on the outside enough, and then be right on the inside so that the kicks don't affect him as much is crazy. Is absolutely crazy. It's very difficult to do. And the thing with Volk that I think is the most impressive is he doesn't make a ton of mistakes, right? So a lot of the things that he's doing them purposefully. He's trained it. He's done reps on those specific things. If you go back and you watch, you can see him throwing leg kicks. You can see him missing the leg kick, but immediately closing the distance again. Like, his distance management, especially against everybody else who's taller than him and larger than him, well, taller than him, he does really well at not letting his tiny size affect him in that specific area. The other thing is, I think it worked in his favor when it came to Yair's kicks, because Yair was kicking over his head consistently throughout that fight. I think if the guy was maybe another 2, 3, maybe even 4 inches taller, he probably would have eaten a shin right to his face. And I think that was one of the adjustments that Yair didn't end up making in that fight. And I think the fight was difficult to not say that there were shades of Yair and Frankie Edgar, right? All the ground control, all the ground damage that happened in that fight. But you'd have to give Volkanovski his props because he was standing with Yair as well. He was really causing Yair to not make effective striking in there. His kicks were kind of all over the place. He kind of tried to almost overwhelm him when he could with volume, but the accuracy and sort of the sharpness that we normally see from Yair wasn't really there. And I think a lot of that had to do with the pressure from Volkanovski and the prospect of having to work and take him down and all that kind of stuff. I think it really affected Yair throughout the fight, and it got worse. It got really bad throughout the fight.
I think it's a great point. His distance management, especially given his stature, and I imagine in a fight like this, going into this matchup, he and his teammates and his coaches probably really put an extra emphasis on this. Like, hey, this guy isn't just bigger than you, because almost everybody he fights is at least taller than him. But Yair, with his Taekwondo pedigree, he fights so long and he can attack you from such range that the onus on distance management was probably tenfold for Volkanovski in this fight. And man, he's so composed. He executes a game plan. He's so present. He's so dialed in. That's the word. Volkanovski is so dialed. And I mean, all these guys are fucking dialed in. But Volkanovski, he finds another level, man. And Mark, to your point, which I also love, it's like he'll spar and he'll chess match with you until he's like, all right, this is over. And then he puts his foot on the gas. Maybe that's like his rugby days, coming into play. He knows when to put his foot on the gas and put his head down and be like, take down, ground and pound, savage. He has such a great recipe. He's hard to find. And if you do find him, he's hard to hurt. He has a good chin. He has an iron will. He has great hands, great striking. He's great. He's very good on the ground. Great takedown defense. He's just like the total package, man. Just the total package. And now this is his 6th featherweight title win, his 5th featherweight title defense. He's now 6-1 in UFC title fights. I mean, just tremendous stuff, man. And he's not slowing down anytime soon. That being said, Mark, what do we think is next for Volkanovski? Is he going to wait around for another lightweight shot, or is he going to defend featherweight again?
I just want to make one more quick point, which is that
Do it.
I also feel like he is one of the most calm fighters we ever see within a fight. Like, he truly gives off vibes like he could get beat for 20 minutes. It's not like we've seen this scenario, but as if he could get beat for 20 minutes and go to his stool and have his corner be like, Alex, we got to change this, we got to change it. And he'd be like, guys, like, I got 5 minutes. I'm going to finish him. Like, don't worry. Like, that's really what he seems like in there. Like, he just always feels like it's in his control.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in terms of what he's going to do, obviously there are only 2 options, barring some crazy curveball. And we know what they are. It's going to be Ilia Topuria or it's going to be Islam Makhachev. He has said that he needs a small surgery done. It does seem like it's still in the realm of possibility based on some, tweets from his team and stuff that I've been seeing, that he could be ready to fight Islam in Abu Dhabi in October. And if he can, he may get that fight, considering that Charles Oliveira has stated he won't be ready until November, and considering Poirier and Gaethje are probably going to put a beating on each other that maybe takes them out of that equation no matter who wins that fight. Yeah. So who knows? I guess it could be him. If he's not fighting Islam in October on that specific card, then I do think we end up waiting longer for the Islam rematch, and that he probably gets booked against Topuria in like November or December. That's my guess. I think the only way the Islam fight happens is if it's because they need an opponent for that card and Volk fits the bill. But yeah, it'll be one or the other, and I'm here for either one, to be quite honest.
Oh, God, Topuria. His time has come. That fight is going to be, if it happens and when it happens, that fight is going to be absolutely insane. I might set a record for most palpitations I've ever had going into a fight. What about you, Armor? What do you think is next? You think lightweight shot? You think waiting around for Topuria? I mean, staying down at featherweight for Topuria?
I think kind of just like Mark said, it's going to depend on the surgery, right? I mean, Volk seems like the guy that he said he wants to still fight at least one more time this year. He said he wanted to fight 2 more times this year, but I think it's safe to say that's not going to happen. So he might still be able to fight one more time this year. October seems like crazy soon, especially if he's getting a surgery and it's some kind of arm surgery. I don't know if there
That's
were
what I thought.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there were any specifics on it. He's probably very much capable of doing a December card, I would imagine. But then at that point, that's probably not Islam if Islam is trying to fight in October. So that might mean he's going to get another featherweight contender, which at that point would be Topuria. And to be honest, man, like like Mark, I'm kind of down with both. If he ends up fighting Makhachev, I think I still take him in that fight again. And then if he ends up fighting, and then if he's going to fight Topuria, I have a little bit more trouble picking that fight. I'll be completely honest with you.
He's been very dismissive of Topuria, more than I ever expected him to be.
Has he really?
He's pretty respectful of his opponents, and with Topuria, he's like, he's not an issue. Like he really has been playing that card, which is interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
But
maybe he's trying to psych
the
himself
Islam
up.
thing is so interesting too. Not to go on too big of a tangent, but like, if Volk ain't going to be ready, and Charles sticks to not being ready as he said, they better hope Poirier or Gaethje gets a quick KO and can turn around. Because if not, I don't know what they're going to do with this card. I mean, Arman Sarukian might get a fucking rematch. I don't. He's might be the only logical other choice.
That would be a great fight too.
I mean, yeah, but like not one anyone thought was coming.
This is true.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the loser in this contest, the guy who lost his interim featherweight title, Yair El Pantera Rodriguez. Omar, what do you think is next for Rodriguez here?
I feel like it's been enough time, and I feel like Brian Ortega should probably get back in the mix. And I also feel like that's a fight that deserves a rematch, considering the way things ended. There's always going to be some controversy that, you know.
Is that where he popped his shoulder out?
Well, regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah. There, whether that was an actual submission, whether the arm popped out by itself and all this other bullshit, it doesn't really matter. The way it ended with all that controversy just warrants another fight, just to kind of make it clear. And Brian Ortega needs another fight, or needs a fight at this point. He's been out for quite some time, and I think it's the perfect time to get that done.
But what about you, Mark? If you were the matchmaker,
I could not agree
what
more.
would you do next? Oh, okay. Good to know. GTK.
Could not agree more. I don't know why it has been so quiet regarding Ortega. I felt like we had hit the point where we were expecting to hear some like news on him, if I recall, and we really have not. But I gotta assume we're getting close here to him returning, and we got absolutely teased with that booking. It's an incredible booking. We were all ready to see it. We didn't really get to see it. I need to find out who was the better man there.
In the UFC, Brian Ortega has only lost to 3 men: Frankie Edgar, Max Holloway, and Alexander Volkanovski.
Oh, see,
It's the styles, man.
No, I'm sorry. I'm
It's
looking at
really
Yair.
the styles.
My bad. Fucking scratch that from the record.
But Yair has a bad habit of not doing what I think he needs to do on the ground against guys who don't want to get up, right? Or who don't give a shit if they're on the ground and they're going to pound on you. And it was the same thing with Frankie Edgar. Like, the fact that Yair has a closed guard against Alexander Volkanovski, what's the plan? Like, what is the plan? Because you're not going anywhere in closed guard. You're not transitioning. You're not moving your hips. You're not doing shit. You're not shrimping. There's nothing. So short of you trying to go for a Hail Mary submission for 25 minutes, I feel like there needs to be something better to do in those situations. I think that's his weakest aspect, I think, at this point. And against high-level guys who are good at being on top and who don't collapse to submission attempts and things like that, guys like Volkanovski, guys like probably like Max Holloway, who if they wanted to take it to the ground, they could. We've seen that happen before. I think he needs to get to that point where that part of his game evolves.
Okay, let me just correct the record. Brian Ortega has only lost to 3 men, luckily for me. Holloway, Volkanovski, and Yair. And Yair, I don't really count that as a loss.
I was just trying to look up what Ortega's deal is, and I only could find one thing on all of Twitter, which was Giga saying that they had been targeting him and Ortega, but that he has heard Ortega opted to get another surgery. So maybe he is not back soon.
Okie dokie.
Balls.
Yeah, that would suck a lot.
Yep.
Sure would.
What is that? 2 years? At that point, right? Because we're coming up on, I feel like, the 2-year mark. Or
I don't think it's been that long, has it?
dude,
No,
I don't know.
It was July of last year, so it's been 1 year currently.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on. You guys good to move on?
Yep.
Yeah, I guess if it can't be Ortega, maybe I'll audible to like a Calvin Kattar. That's an action fight. That'll be fun.
Love it. All right, in the co-main event of UFC 290, once again at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Alexandre Pantoja stamps his name in the history books, capturing the UFC flyweight title by defeating Brandon Moreno for the 3rd time? Yes?
Yep.
Correct.
Yep.
Getting a split decision over the baby assassin. The scores read 48-47 on 2 scorecards in favor for Pantoja. Moreno earning a 49-46 of his own, which had some people scratching their heads. Omar, how did you think the fight went? Do you feel that a split was warranted? Did you see it for Pantoja in a unanimous sense? And what was your impressions of both men's performances overall?
Yeah, man, this was obviously a rough, emotional fight for me to watch. I'm a big Moreno fan. I wanted to watch this fight back again. I thought Moreno got a lot of the better exchanges between the two of them on the feet. They were both bloodied up. They were both pretty beat up by the end of the fight. But I thought Moreno's hands were landing a lot cleaner. I do know that now we all know that Moreno had a broken arm, I think, in round 1. His
Arm
right
or
arm.
hand?
Hand, sorry.
Yeah.
Was broken in round 1. So you could see him favoring his left a lot throughout that fight, especially later on in the fight. He was doing a lot of left shovel hooks to the body and then left hooks to the head. A lot of those combinations were going in, and Pantoja was fucking blocking none of them. I thought it was a great performance from both guys, to be honest. I thought they're both dogs. I thought it was a very close fight. I had Moreno winning, but like, I get it. I did not have Moreno winning 4 rounds to 1.
Wait, you had Moreno winning the fight?
I did. That's why I said I wanted to watch the fight again.
Wow. All right.
Because you did not seem to think that at all.
No.
I didn't remember that you said that.
Yeah. But, yeah. Anyway, I didn't think that he won the 5th round, which I think is one of the rounds that one of those judges scored for Moreno. I definitely don't think he won 4 rounds to 1. I thought it was 3 rounds to 2. I thought going into the 5th round, I thought Moreno had already won the fight on the cards personally, but that 5th round was definitely for Pantoja. There's no question about that.
So wait, I'm sorry. You scored what for Moreno? 2, 3, and 4 is what you did?
I believe so. Yes.
He says with his tail between his legs. He's like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
No, that's hey.
But again, I want to watch it again because I know for me there were frustrations between the dynamic of how the ground game was working because there wasn't to me as much damage on the ground done as there was on the feet in a lot of those exchanges with Moreno and Pantoja. There was a shit ton of ground control, which you can't deny. But I thought the damage that both of them did to each other throughout that fight, and especially one, Moreno to Pantoja in certain situations where Pantoja had more control in the round, I thought Moreno had done more damage. So I think that's really where the fight got a little weird. It looks like majority of people scored it for Pantoja, so I guess it's the hill I'm going to die on.
Mark,
Well,
talk
you'll
to
have
us.
to rewatch it. And hey, if you
Yeah,
come
talk
with
to
the
us.
same take, I'm curious to know.
Yeah.
Talk to us, Mark,
Like,
about
you're
your
gonna be on a
take of the
delay again.
fight.
It sucks.
I'm on such a fucking delay. I hate it.
It's so painful. I don't know how we fucking solve this. It's every week.
I know.
Yeah, I feel like I might talk for a year about this fight, but here we go. This fight was insanity. Yet another all-time classic given to us from Brandon Moreno. Pantoja now gets to etch his name onto the list of legendary fights. This thing was amazing. The damage that both of these guys took through the course of this fight, specifically the amount of strikes that Pantoja endured to finally become a champion, was incredible. And it was a car crash from the opening bell. Pantoja likes to fight that way now. We know that, where he just comes out and he tries to run you over. But Brandon Moreno ain't a guy that gets run over. And he was ready to throw heat back. And he was doing just that in round one. But Pantoja kept coming forward right into the heavy artillery that was coming at him from Moreno. And he did that all fight long. That was really one of the stories of this fight, is the way Pantoja just refused to stop moving forward no matter what. But I'll probably circle back to that. But in round one, he dropped Moreno real bad with the left, busts him up, and for a split second, I thought he was going to get him out of there. The way Moreno fell looked kind of bad. But credit to Moreno, man. He's so tough, and soon enough, he's back on the feet, exchanging again. But obviously, round one was a Pantoja round. Then round two, Moreno shows you what a champion he is and comes back to have his biggest round of the whole fight easily. He was absolutely jabbing Pantoja's face off. He takes his back at one point, and all the commentary can talk about at this point is the energy levels of Pantoja and how he thought he was going to end it early, and he came out too hard, and he's slowing down, and he's never been to a fourth round, and blah, blah, blah. All the other ways that they can say the same thing. And Alexandre Pantoja proceeded to go to war for 15 more minutes after that, never slowing down, never even considering not pushing through to find the moments that he needed to ensure that he would be a champion. So that was awesome. Back to the rounds. Round three, he rushes Moreno early to secure the clinch after kind of getting beat on in round two, so he can push for that takedown, and he takes the back, which was brilliant of him to try to come out hot and do that. And makes Moreno defend the choke for a while. And just through that, he kind of took the momentum back when it felt like it was swinging wildly away from him. And on the feet, he was doing anything he could to score. Like I said, he was walking forward willingly saying, I'm going to eat 2 shots right now just to create an opening so I can get 2 off. Like it was almost, that was the way he was creating openings, was willingly walking into Moreno shots. And he was trying to mix to the body and all that. He was doing well. And then he got another takedown late to in my mind, ensure round three for him and have him up 2-1. Round four was definitely the least exciting round of the fight. Live, I gave it to Pantoja just based on control. But on the rewatch, I actually thought Moreno did enough damage in that round, especially late in that round. There was a really big elbow late to swing it his way. So live, I had it 4-1 Pantoja. On the rewatch, I actually did have it 3-2. And 2 out of the 3 judges scored it exactly the same way. They had it, we'll forget the one judge. We'll get back to that person. But 2 of the 3 judges had it 2-2 going into round 5, all to play for, as Michael Bisping would say. And Pantoja came out, and he took round 5. There was no slowdown from this man, no slippage, just a war from both guys. And in that round, Pantoja exchanged evenly on the feet. He got a big takedown. He took the back. He landed a few little shots here and there from the back. He couldn't land a ton, but he did enough to take the round and to take the fight. It was 48-47 Pantoja. Personally, I think saying 49-46 Pantoja is more acceptable than saying Moreno won. I'm curious for Omar to rewatch and listen to his argument if he feels differently. I think the judge that had it 49-46 for Moreno is an embarrassment and should have whoever – was it a girl or a guy? I didn't even look at who it was. I think I have it open now that I'm thinking about it. Oh, I guess I closed it.
It's a guy. It was Ben Cartilage.
Ben Cartilage should fucking not judge a fight for a hot minute. I don't think you can score 1, 3, or 5 from Moreno personally. I think absolutely the right man won. And I think people need to celebrate Alexandre Pantoja and give him his due. He walked through fire in this fight. The man has never heard the word quit, and he earned every single ounce of that title belt. And I love Moreno. How can you not? But I am very happy for Alexandre Pantoja.
Amen. Yeah, especially hearing about his family stuff right after. He said his dad abandoned them, and then he looked into the camera with weepy eyes and was like, "Are you proud of me now, Dad?" or something like that. I was like, Jesus.
Yeah.
I
don't know the whole story.
I know.
Yes,
I know. Dude. I knew in that moment how fucked up I was, because in that moment I was like, man, fuck that guy. How old are you, bro? If he ain't loving you yet, fuck that guy. I would have been on the camera like, hey, Dad, fuck you, man. That's how I feel about that. But I get it. He just wants his dad to love him. I get it.
Omar
but
was
I
going
just
through it emotionally on this card. He was ready.
This was not
how are we at this point, and others. It wasn't a good night for Omar.
My wife legitimately asked me if I was okay. After this fight specifically too, she was like, "Are you okay?" I was like,
"Did you
dude,
hear
the Yasmin one killed me, man."
Did you hear too that Pantoja was driving for Uber Eats?
I
a
did.
Fight back when he fought Brandon Royval. What a fucking story, man. Good for this guy.
Yeah.
Man, it's crazy. Hopefully now he's starting to he'll earn a nice fat paycheck now that he's champ and will defend the belt.
Yeah.
Speaking of,
So can we
let's now
run it back then, or
turn our attention to what is next for these two gentlemen. Do you guys think that we're going to rematch, or does Moreno have to kind of get back in line a little bit and go earn himself another win in the division? What do you think, Mark?
As much as I would love to say let's run it right back, since it was friggin' awesome, it is now 3-0 in favor of Pantoja, and they're all in MMA. This isn't some Izzy Pereira kickboxing situation. It's all MMA. So I do think maybe we see a fourth, just because of the circumstances and what this fight was like and who Brandon Moreno is. But I think he may have to earn it with at least a win, if not another, to get there. So I think you got to wait a little bit. And in that case, I do kind of think it's going to be Amir Albazi. You don't love it, considering the gift of a decision that he got. But Pantoja already beat Royval, and he's really the only other guy who's right there for the title. Maybe they do say, let's do that rematch now, but I feel like it's easier to say we'll go with the fresh opponent in Albazi. So I don't know. We'll see. Kopp is already booked against Cara France. Figgy's moving up. So my guess is we get Pantoja and Albazi.
Still a great fight. What do you think, Omar? Any other fresh ideas?
No, I mean, there's not a lot of flexibility right now at the top of that division. Everything is kind of where it's at. The titles have been, I don't want to say held up, because we have gotten some legendary fights between Davis and Figueiredo and Moreno for a little while now.
And now this fight too.
But there hasn't been a lot of movement though. So I think we're kind of at a point now where, if we are going to not run it back, I think that's probably the best thing that they could do at this point.
Okay, what about Viva Mexico, the baby-faced assassin Brandon Moreno? Omar, what do you think? What if you were the matchmaker for the UFC? What would you do next with the assassin baby?
I mean, he's fought a lot of these guys already. It's been a few years here and there, nothing too crazy. But we do have Matthias Nickal, who's number 6 in the division. He hasn't fought Brandon Moreno. If we're not, again, going to run it back, maybe that's something that they can consider.
Mark?
I'll say if Brandon Royval does not get the title shot and it does go to Albazi and they can convince Brandon that he is going to have to take another fight, that you could book that one, considering their first fight ended because of an injury and is unresolved. So maybe Royval would jump at that chance. If that doesn't work out, I also think if Manel Kopp is to beat Cara France, that Moreno and Kopp could be a pretty awesome fight as well.
Yeah, man. Sure would. All right, well, let us move on in the interest of time. Congrats, huge congrats to Alexandre Pantoja. I'll echo what Omar said. Fuck that guy's dad. But also, I get it. All right. In the middleweight division of this main card, UFC 290, a huge fight went down between Dricus du Plessis and Robert Whittaker. And Dricus du Plessis has stamped his meal ticket, gentlemen, defeating Bobby Knuckles, Robert Whittaker, by TKO, the official time 2:23 of the second round in a 3-round contest. My goodness. Mark, what is your take of the performance of du Plessis?
I still can't believe that we are sitting here talking about this result. I really can't. He is one of the most interesting fighters to figure out how he is doing the things that he is doing. And for the first 2 minutes of this fight, it was all Whittaker on the feet, just like we expected. He was picking him apart. He was countering him. He was timing du Plessis. Then he gets a takedown. Yes, Dricus gets up, but through half a round, it seems like Rob is in control. And then you do start to see just a little bit how the constant pressure of du Plessis was starting to matter, a bit more success on the feet. And then the sheer power and size of du Plessis is accentuated on that takedown because it was not the cleanest head and arm takedown ever, but it didn't matter. He got him down. And then he was very powerful on top. Rob was in some real trouble underneath him. He was struggling down there. And then we get the reset, end of the round, and you're like, all right, Rob's going to figure this out. His technique is so much better. The same thing everyone in the world was saying going into this fight. And round 2 starts, and again, the technique of Whittaker is winning. He takes those first couple minutes. He's landing on Dricus. And for the most part, and this is all fight long, Dricus does have a really nice high guard that ends up taking the sting off a lot of these shots. But then despite the fact that Whittaker is kind of calming you again as you watch, it's one monster jab. Dricus throws a jab that Rob evades. Rob then starts to step in, and Dricus times another one as Rob is coming toward him that lands hard and clean, and Rob dropped to a knee. Obviously, he did get back up, but he was hurt, and Dricus knew it, and he poured on the pressure, and he got him out of there. It bombs to the body and to the head against the cage, and he stops Robert friggin' Whittaker. Like, it's incredible. And as I said, the craziest part of all of it is that this man is now the number 1 ranked middleweight in the world. At least I'm assuming he is in the UFC. He is for me. And I still can't put my finger on exactly what makes him so elite. And I really can't recall another fighter that I have quite felt this way about, because his striking is not elite. It's far from the most technical we've ever seen. His wrestling is not elite. We've seen guys scramble out from under him in other fights. His jiu-jitsu is not elite. It's not like he is otherworldly there. And don't get me wrong, he is good at every single one of these things for absolutely certain. He can knock you out. He can sub you. He can wrestle. But usually when guys reach these heights, you're able to say, like, wow, this is unreal. And with Dricus, you're not really saying that. So I've been trying to think it through ever since this fight, because it's like sticking in my brain that this man just beat Robert Whittaker, and I so did not see it coming. And I think the key for him is really just that he is huge and powerful for middleweight, and that he is very hard to hurt, and will never stop pressuring you. So when you mix that in with the well-roundedness, he can kind of just overcome challenges that it doesn't seem like he should be able to overcome if we're talking about purely technique analysis of a matchup. So I'm very curious what you guys think in that regard in terms of what makes him this good. But I was blown away, literally blown away, maybe more than any fight I can remember in a long time, in terms of what he was able to do to a guy as unbelievable as Robert Whittaker.
Omar, what do you think? What were your thoughts on the performances of these two guys and the formula that du Plessis presents in the cage?
I'm a person who loves technique. I love to watch, and this is for anybody. I mean, it could literally be a dude at the gym. It could be an amateur fight. It could be a professional fight. It could be whatever. I love watching technique. Dricus du Plessis has the ugliest fucking everything I've ever seen. and it works. It absolutely works. So, kind of like Mark, I don't get it. I don't get it. He took Robert Whittaker down with like a headlock choke that should never have worked, ever. This is not even how you do it. It wasn't even like a proper judo throw. He just like bullied him down to the ground. It was ridiculous. And I think the real issue is you can't find a guy like Dricus du Plessis to emulate. And so when you're training for somebody like him, you're not going to get sparring partners that are going to give you the looks that you're going to get from Dricus du Plessis once you're actually in there with him. There is the power, obviously, there is all that, but there is an awkwardness and a fucked upness to the way that this man fights. And it doesn't make sense, and it's very difficult to prepare for. And I think the real issue is we saw Robert Whittaker drop the ball, and we saw him not make any adjustments throughout. He was literally not doing anything to the body, rarely doing anything to the legs. He was trying to push forward, throwing those those jabs forward, jab, left hook, trying to continuously hit an area that was shelled up from jump. And Whittaker never really did anything to make the adjustments that Dricus was making on the fly to him. So Dricus seems like he's obviously super competent in the octagon, but the technique is just like, I can't believe it worked. It works. I can't hate on it, but I just can't want to copy it either.
Yeah, man. I think it's to your question, Mark. Like, what is the formula the recipe that du Plessis brings into the octagon? He has decent size. I don't think he's the biggest middleweight, but he's just.
Oh, I think he's huge.
He's not. But how tall is he? Is he like 6'1", 6'2"?
Oh, I don't know about height. I just mean
he's thick.
He seems so much bigger than everyone he fights.
He's such a for lack of a better term, a mesomorphic frame. He's just he's a tank, man. And he knows it, and he's a bruiser, and that's he uses it. And he is sacrificing brain cells for the he's playing the long game here, or maybe no, it's the opposite of the long game. And he uses incredible pressure. He's a bruiser. He comes forward. He has some kind of awkward striking style, and a great, incredible, unbreakable spirit. What a handful. What a handful for any middleweight. One thing is for certain. It will be a very interesting matchup between him and Adesanya. Let's talk about the moment that we got treated to when Israel Adesanya was brought into the octagon after du Plessis' win. I count myself among. I understand it's good theater, but the poor guy just fought for like 10 minutes. Like, can you give the guy a break and not have somebody like get in his face? That being said, it was I'm not going to call it a special moment. It was a unique moment. It was a unique exchange. Omar, what were your thoughts? Let's start with you.
I mean, I feel like my thoughts were very similar to probably a lot of people's thoughts when Israel started dropping N-bombs. I was like, oh, this is taking quite a turn here. Got really dark really quick. A lot of shades of Conor versus Khabib back in the day when things got real dark and we started talking about terrorism and all kinds of crazy shit. This is giving me the bad vibes, the bad juju. I mean, it's a fight that people are going to want to watch at this point. You can't ignore the tension between them, right? It's going to sell, I think. And Izzy is one of these guys that knows how to work the business. And I think a part of him is a little emotional, but I think he's using it. And you can tell he's emotional. He's over here talking about 36 and me. It's not even the same fucking numbers. You know what I mean? Like,
neither of those numbers is correct.
No, it's not. It's not.
What is it?
It's just, you know, nobody does, but I think he's emotionally affected by it for sure, but I think he's still in his mind, I think he's still thinking about the business part as well.
From the time I first heard Izzy's reaction, as in well before this event, I'm saying, when Izzy first reacted to Dricus' comments about Africa, I knew the build to this fight, if we ever got here, was probably going to be dark. And I almost feel like no one is really the bad guy here. Like,
Yeah.
Dricus made this point of that he trains in Africa, and he breeds African era every day, and these other guys who have been African champions left Africa and did it out of other places, and that is the point he was trying to make. And I get that point. But at the same time, when dudes who are African-born, African blood hear that, you got to remember, Africa has a very complicated history.
Especially South Africa.
Correct. And when they are hearing this from a man who is only in Africa because his family once came there from another country during dark times in Africa, they are not going to love to hear it. And they also have a right to not love to hear it. So that's what I mean. Like, Dricus has a right to make the point, and maybe he didn't quite think how it would go over. And they have a right to be like, bro, I don't care what African air you breathe. I'm more African than you will ever be. So everyone has a right to make the point they want to make. But when I heard it, I was like, Izzy is either going to brush this off and just, play his cool usual, it's nonsense, whatever, I don't have to concern myself with who's more African, or he's going to take it super to heart. And we know Izzy can do that with things. And he did. So from the first time he commented on it, I was like, this is going to get dark. Did I think it was going to go quite that route when he came into the cage? Maybe not, but I have since seen an interview. So I heard a lot of people saying, oh, look how bombed Izzy was. My God, he was bombed. I've since seen an interview of him saying he was going to do exactly that. That if Dricus won, he was going to go in the cage and call him a word that I'm not going to say right now, but the word that he said quite a lot of times. So that was all planned. That was what Izzy wanted, to go in there and call him over and over again. So that was his tact there. And, yeah, this is what we're going to get now in the build-up to this fight. It's going to get dark. There's probably going to be other things said that make some of us feel like, oh, man, wish we could just focus on the fight here. But it's the fight game, and I feel like they probably both have a right to say some things, and we're going to hear them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was awkward for everybody. I'm just glad that Du Plessis didn't say it himself. There was a moment where I think the world was kind of like, oh my God, here it comes. Because what did he?
Well, when he said, "I'm not your," I was like, "No," and then you said, "Brother," and I was like, "Whoo."
Yeah, what did he say? He was like, "I'm African. I sure ain't your brother, bro, or whatever."
Yeah, I thought he was going to say something else for a second.
I'll tell you what, man. Du Plessis looked, I don't want to say shaken by the moment, but like he wasn't ready for that.
No,
like,
he wasn't.
But again,
he
just fought. It was so tough. It was so tough.
Yeah.
But I just hope that Du Plessis is careful with what he says in this build-up so that he doesn't actually cross any racial lines and get this darker than it has to be. He can say his whole I'm the African, I live in Africa deal as much as he wants, but he's got to stay there.
Yeah.
Well, but here's the thing, right? Like the Africa point, the way he said it, it's super easy to insinuate you're making assumptions about other African champions or other champions that claim that they are African champions or from Africa, right? Mm-hmm. Like Izzy was like 9 or 10 when he moved to New Zealand. Like it wasn't like he was a loaf of bread and then was moved over here before he actually grew up in Nigeria. Like he has roots in Nigeria. He had friends in Nigeria. He had a life in Nigeria. These guys like are born and kind of raised there, and then they move to a different country. It's sort of like if somebody from Colombia, which is very like, or any fucking country here on this side of the hemisphere, dudes come up, to go to school or do whatever the hell up in here in America, and they've been living in their home country for 12 plus years or whatever it is, and it takes them a little while to adjust and whatever else, but it doesn't make them any less African or whatever it is that they are. But I think that his choice of words, the way that he specifically wanted to call out how he's the real African champion, I think that's what got him in trouble. And I think had he just said something like, and Ariel made this point actually, but I think had he said something like, I'm going to be the best African champion, no one would have had a fucking problem with that.
Even if he said, I'm going to be the first African champion who still trains out of Africa, it would have been like, yeah, no one can argue that.
Yeah.
But he worded it a little more aggressively.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Continue. Like he kept doubling down. Like he was like going in stages of like how African he was. And it's like, bro, like chill the fuck out.
He also said these guys never brought the belts to Africa. And they literally all did. Like
all
I have seen videos of all three of them in Africa with the belts.
all of that. It was literally like the first thing that they did. It was like the week of they go to Africa and like it was like parades and everything.
Yes, correct. And
he's probably just
like
upset.
Building UFC Africa. He's like heavily invested.
Dude, Ngannou is building and literally the ambassador of PFL Africa.
Oh yeah, and him too. You're right. Good point. Yes.
Like it's a weird. It's like I get maybe he wants the country behind him. Maybe he wants to be the countryman or something like that. But his choice of words is less than mids, my guys.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about something else. Let's move on. Unless you guys want to quickly match up Bobby Knuckles.
Oh, sure, I will, because I like my matchup. He's beaten so many of these guys, but there is one guy that he has not fought, and I think he really fits in here pretty perfectly right now, and that man is Sean Strickland. I would love to see that.
Oh, that's a great fight. Yeah,
it sure is.
Yeah, let's go with that. That's a great fucking fight. Because if he's not going to fight, Pereira is obviously going up to 205. That was a fight that I would have loved to have seen if he was staying around at 185.
Yeah,
but
same. I would have.
Strickland's a great fight. That's a good one.
It is. It sure is. Okay, let us talk about what do we got next here. Also on the main card, at a catch weight of 158 pounds, Dan the Hangman Hooker takes home the W over Jalin Turner by a split decision. The scorecards read 29-28 and a 29-28 for Hooker. Turner earning his own 29-28. Omar, start us off this time. Who do you think won this fight? And give us your take of Dan Hooker gutting out the W.
Man, Dan Hooker knows how to make a fight really goddamn anxiety-ridden. That first round was rough. That first round was real rough for Dan. Considering the recent performances that he's had. I was concerned that we were heading in that same direction after the first round. Correct me if I'm wrong, but was that clean ass head kick? Was that the first round?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that head kick broke Dan Hooker's face.
No, that was round two.
Was it round two?
Yeah, that was round two.
So Dan Hooker walked out of that cage fucked up. Let's be clear about that. Jalin Turner took some shots, but Dan Hooker was literally broken. There was a broken orbital that he got from that clean kick to the face where it was straight up shin right against his cheek. And then he also seemingly broke his arm as well. Quite bad. I thought Dan Hooker... You want to talk about dog? Dan Hooker's a dog. Because after that first round of kind of getting his ass beat a little bit, he came back in round 2 and round 3 to completely put it on Jalin Turner. I was actually surprised to see Jalin Turner start to melt in there the way that he was. I don't think we've really ever seen that. We saw it in his last fight. He had a little bit of trouble, obviously, but I don't think we saw him melt the way that Dan Hooker eventually got him to. So I thought it was a great performance from Dan Hooker. He took a lot of damage in that fight. But goddamn, was that not the win that he needed? I mean, good on Dan Hooker, man, because he was in a rough spot. Also, what is this blonde hair tattooed Dan Hooker though? I mean, this is the new mythological creature unlocked here, man. Shit is out of control.
Mark, what do you think?
What an awesome fight this was. I feel like it got a bit overshadowed by everything else that happened on this card that was so huge, but this thing was great. when they were fresh, things were favoring Jalin Turner. Like I think we all thought they might. I believe we all picked Turner and actually got this one wrong. He was the faster fighter. He was landing with more power. He was always so well balanced on his shots from both stances. I mean, he looked really good early. And then mid-round 2, he lands the huge left head kick and pours it on Hooker, but Hooker survives it. But then we hit, 9 minutes into that fight, and it still at that point seems like Dan Hooker does not have a lot of answers, but he's pressuring and he's trying to make it ugly and he's trying to find a way to change the fight. And then he does with like 40 seconds left in the round where he is on his way to losing it. He lands a beautiful left that stumbles Jalin Turner into the cage, and he absolutely smells blood and puts on a 40-second barrage that overshadows everything Jalin Turner had done all around long, including the head kick. And if he would have had 45 seconds instead of 40, I think he would have even capped it off with a tap, because that rear naked choke on the chin looked like it had Jalin Turner's eyes popping out of his head when the horn sounded. So that was a crazy 40 seconds that Dan Hooker put on him to take that round. And at that point, I think Dan Hooker knew. I think he went back to his corner thinking, I did it. It's a dogfight now, and I'm the dog in here. And give credit to Jalin Turner, man. He tried. It almost looked for a moment early in round 3 like he may steal some of the momentum back, but Dan Hooker was not having it. He absorbed that last gasp from Turner and just picked up the pace again, and Turner didn't have enough left to hang. Maybe it was the weight cut issues that he had. Maybe it would have happened either way. But Turner slowed down big time, and Dan Hooker may have even sped up. He hit this mode where he was just walking through Turner shots to land his own. He landed another big left that dropped Turner. And again, credit to Turner, because I thought he was going to quit right there, and he didn't. And then for some reason from there, Hooker grappled instead of letting Turner up. I thought he absolutely should have let him up. But, maybe now we know it's because his forearm was broken. So maybe he was like, let me just lay on the man. But he rides it out, and he gets a classic Dan Hooker W, looking like the Dan Hooker of old, fighting through a facial fracture as well and the broken forearm to overcome Turner and get a massive win for his career.
Whew. I think it's the perfect word for him. His dog. Honestly, it's like, I thought it wasn't that he unlocked a new thing. Honestly, I thought this was just a Dan Hooker fight, to be quite honest. And it's like, this is how he loses. This is how he lost. It's how he lost to Poirier, because that was dog versus dog. And this is when Dan Hooker wins. This is how he wins, man. He has great Muay Thai, great striking. He's well-rounded enough, and he's a fucking fighter's fighter, man. You sign up for a fight against Dan Hooker, pretty much guaranteed that both of y'all are gonna get fucked up a bit. And I think I picked Jalin Turner. If either of you guys remember better than I do,
I think we all did.
Oh, really?
I will look right now. Yes, we did. We all picked Jalin Turner.
And I'm not getting off the Jalin Turner train right here. I believe in Jalin Turner. I think, especially for the weight class that he's occupying, the guy has potential. He brings a lot of firepower into the octagon. He has great attributes for the weight class. But it wasn't even like a styles make fights kind of matchup to me. It was like, I think if those guys fought 10 times, I bet you it would be pretty even, because Jalin Turner, he's a pretty talented guy as well.
I think so too. Agree.
Yeah.
This past weekend, he went in there with a Dan Hooker that was a bit more of a dog than he was, and he managed to get the fight where he wanted it to be, that being Dan Hooker. So let's talk about, Mark, put your UFC matchmaker hat back on, please. Tell me what you would do with the Hangman next.
To me, this was the kind of performance from Dan Hooker that should really shoot him back into the mix and into potentially big fights. So I'd like to see him get a chance at really mattering again here with someone like a Mateusz Gamrot or Rafael Fiziev. Granted, I'm not sure how long the arm puts him out, so maybe this is more of a can't book right now situation where we need to wait and see what things look like when he's ready. I'm not sure how big of a deal that forearm is, but either way, I think we are back to Dan Hooker being in fights against top 10 dudes right now.
Let's do it. I love it. Omar, what do you think?
Yeah, so it might be a little bit before Dan Hooker was back. I don't know if you guys saw the X-rays of the injury, but the forearm is literally like not in the right spot. It's like shattered inward. So he's definitely got a couple of surgeries. It looks like that he's got to take care of. I didn't listen to the Ariel interview about all the details necessarily, but he's got 2 surgeries so far that he needs to get done. So I would assume he's probably done for 2023 at this point. And with that in mind, it probably doesn't make a ton of sense to match him up with anybody, because I think the landscape is probably going to be a little wild by the time we get to 2024.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah, man. Let's real quick say something about Jalin Turner. Still super talented for the weight class. What do you think he does next? Mark?
I'll go slightly outside of the box, and I will say our random dude who matters now that we were talking about last week, Elves Brenner, who just beat Guram. I think it gives Turner a chance to bounce back, and it gives Brenner the chance to show that he might be real.
I'm down. Omar, you have any other ideas?
Didn't you have Elves Brenner at like some crazy ass ranking as of last week? I can't remember now.
I have him at 15.
Yeah, they don't even have him ranked yet.
Yeah, and I get that. They probably have, Guram ranked a bit lower than I did. It's just tough for me to rank a dude who beat Gamrot much lower. So Guram is 1 spot under him in my rankings.
Yeah. I mean, I don't hate that. I feel like I'm going to just kind of keep throwing Matt Favola at people until somebody takes that fight.
He already beat Jalin Turner, by the way.
He what?
He's already beaten Jalin Turner.
Has he really?
Though. But yeah, that's one of Turner's losses. Yep.
How interesting. How long ago was this?
That was back when Favola was like a straight wrestler, and he out-wrestled him. 2019.
Wow. That really wasn't that long ago.
Wow.
But I don't hate the idea of running that back because it's much different now.
Yeah, especially considering the circumstances they're both in now at this point.
Yes.
So it'll be a fun fight.
That's right. Okay, ready to move on? Let's move on, because it is getting late. Okay, middleweight bout. Bo Nickal notches another victory in the middleweight division in the UFC over Val Woodburn. Finishes the fight under 40 seconds. Official time 38 seconds of the very first round. Finishing Val Woodburn with strikes. Not a wrestling maneuver in sight here. Bo Nickal. Once again, just to remind our audience, the 27-year-old American collegiate wrestling phenom out of Colorado, still undefeated in professional mixed martial arts, now 5-0 and now 2-0 under the UFC banner. Mark, start us off here. Give us your take of this very quick performance by Bo Nickal.
Props to Bo Nickal for delivering on the hype again. I know we are still not at any level of relevant opponent, but to show off the hands and win like that was nice. And it was kind of funny to watch, honestly, because Woodburn didn't want to get too close and risk getting taken down. And then Nickal opens up with the striking, but he's not really like 100% comfortable in exchanges yet. So he's like hopping way out of range after every strike he throws. So it was like a 5-piece combo, but with a reset between every piece of it because he kept kind of hopping back out. So it was not a visual that you see often. But, yeah, he dropped Woodburn pretty bad. It was a good stoppage, and it was another step forward for Bo Nickal.
Omar?
Yeah, I mean, if you had Bo Nickal by knockout, I feel like you'd be a liar. Definitely on the feet at the very minimum. I'm sure some people probably had him beating the shit out of somebody on the ground, but it was a wild performance, man. I definitely didn't see that coming from Bo Nickal. To come to find out, according to the commentary booth, Bo Nickal's mom was a boxer. So it seems like Bo Nickal has some hands in his category. It just seems like his wrestling is really his bread and butter and what he spent a majority of his life kind of perfecting. But it doesn't sound like he's that unfamiliar with the hands. And it seemed like Mark is right about the management of the distance and kind of how he kept going in and out, and instead of kind of pushing forward and kind of having that forward pressure. But his hands looked great. The combinations were smooth. They were lengthy. He was catching them right at the end of his punches. It was good technique, man. It was really good technique. So I thought it was a great performance from him, and really letting everybody know that his hands are just as good. It might be just as good as his wrestling is.
Yeah, man. Okay, Omar, let me know who you would match Bo Nickal up with next at 185 pounds. Excuse me.
I mean, dude, what do we do here, man? Do we I kind of want to do this one together, bro, because I don't understand. Do we just shoot him? Do we shoot him to the moon and see what happens?
I'm not doing that yet. It's so interesting with him because he hasn't faced any type of true test yet. You can say, let's see him with a wrestler. Let's see him with a dangerous grappler. Let's see him with a dangerous striker. And all of those are interesting because we haven't seen any of them yet. So there's a million ways you can go for the next step. I do think it's time that we have to test him in one of those ways. It can't just be another guy who it's I don't really know what that guy could do to Bo Nickal. So I thought about some different ones. I'm going to say Rodolfo Vieira. He is a big, strong man. He doesn't go out easily, and he will present a BJJ game that is worlds above anything Bo Nickal has had to deal with as of yet. So that's the type of test that I'll opt for right now. But I don't hate if you wanted to say a knockout dude or whatever, because we haven't seen any of it. So as long as it's a step up, that's good with me.
What do you think?
Yeah, I was kind of in the realm just thinking about a jump that makes sense and something that's not overly stupid, but giving him a name that has some value to it that he can kind of rise off of, so that people aren't consistently saying, who the fuck was that? I think the loser of Fluffy Hernandez and Edmund Shahabazian should fight Bo Nickal at this point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I was going to say, God, Fluffy's a big ask already.
It was the loser of that fight.
Yeah, which already happened. Yeah.
Right.
So you're going to say Edmund. Yeah. I mean, I don't hate it.
Let's move on. I think we got one more before we're going to hop into the lightning round, but I can sense that you guys are already picking it up a little bit. I appreciate it. Okay, the featured bout.
We're fine, dude. The previews are not going to be long.
This is true. This is true. You're right. In the featured bout on ABC and ESPN Plus, UFC 290 in the welterweight division, Robbie Lawler's farewell fight, and what a farewell it was. He gets the knockout victory over Niko Price, a very talented welterweight, at the 38-second mark of the very first round. Well, back-to-back fights, I didn't realize. Both 38 seconds of round one. I mean, what do you got to say?
Super weird.
Mark, start us off. What do you have to say about this 38-second knockout, going out, riding off into the sunset for Robbie Lawler?
How about your boy picking that Robbie Lawler knockout, baby? Let's go. And Pantoja, which I forgot to highlight. Yeah, we say it often on here, but unfortunately, most MMA retirements seem to come with a legend going out on his back. And this was the total opposite. From beginning to end, this was one of the most perfect MMA retirements I can ever recall seeing. From Robbie making the walk to the Last of the Mohican song to the way he stood at the cage door and took it all in, to the way that he was landing that left in the clinch and capped off a legendary career full of knockouts with a clean walk-off knockout. And then to top it all, because the UFC knew ahead of time that this was the end for him, they have this unreal video recap of his career queued up to show. I could watch this thing a million times. And it's so good that it even manages to extract some emotion from Robbie, who is one of the most stoic guys there's ever been. So just perfect in every way from beginning to end. What a night for Robbie Lawler, and I'm so happy that he got to go out like that.
Omar, what did you make of that knockout?
I mean, there's not much to say, man. That knockout was nasty, and it was quick. It was dirty, too, just the way that Lawler likes to fight. Inside of that dirty boxing area, uppercut, hook to the temple,
Nasty.
and that's all she wrote for Niko Price, man. Shout out to Niko Price though for taking that fight. I think everybody kind of was counting him out as it was and wanted Robbie to win, and it was a rough fight, I thought, for Niko to take. I'm sure from Niko's point of view, he got a chance to fight a real legend in Robbie Lawler. But to talk about that video package, that was probably one of the greatest things I've ever seen. And I kind of want them to do a lot more of that, to be honest. And I think it probably doesn't happen because guys don't tend to talk about their retirements before or with so much time before things are going to go down. And obviously Robbie Lawler's been there for so long that.
And then they tend to get knocked out.
Yeah, but I think Robbie Lawler's
Shogun, and are you going to show that after a guy gets knocked out?
Yeah, I guess so. Robbie though was also there for such a long time, and I think was one of the relative OGs of this era of MMA at this point. That I know Dana White was the one who kind of recruited Robbie Lawler and like scouted him and things like that. So I think they have a long history, and I think it was more of a personal thing on that side. But I'm glad they did it, and your boy was in Buffalo Wild Wings, kind of like holding back tears a little bit while Robbie Lawler is like ugly crying on TV. But it was a beautiful moment, and I'm really glad that they did it that way. And I mean, what can you say about Robbie Lawler, man? I mean, that dude has had some of the most legendary fights in welterweight history. I mean, Robbie Lawler and Rory McDonald is one of the greatest fights you'll ever see in your life. Robbie Lawler and Johnny Hendricks had some of the best fights that I can recall in the welterweight division. Definitely some of the most competitive fights and the violent fights I've seen. I can't say enough about Robbie Lawler. If you didn't get on the train early enough, you definitely missed out on one hell of an era in Robbie Lawler.
Yeah, agree. I'll talk about Robbie for a minute as well, Mike. Unless you want to get in first.
No, you go first.
Okay. The man is the definition of entertainment when it comes to MMA, of just savage, heart-pounding entertainment. He could always end any fight with one shot. He was so hard to hurt and so willing to engage in wars, and he would go for the kill from the opening bell to the final bell. And that is why we love him, and that's why everyone loves him. And what a crazy career this man had. He was like the next big thing when he debuted in the UFC and finished Aaron Riley way back, whatever freaking year that was. I should have probably had it open for the point of this. But 02, thank you. 02, fucking crazy. But he went 4-3 in his initial stint in the UFC. One of the losses was due to injury, so you could call it 4-2. But he, the first few were wins and knockouts, and he was this huge deal. And then he got beat by Nick Diaz. And then he got beat again by Evan Turner. And then the UFC let him go. And all this hype of being the next big thing was kind of just like all of a sudden over. And he bounced around. He went to King of the Cage and Icon. And he even took a fight in Pride. Turned up in Elite XC where he knocked out Murillo Hua. Then he knocked out Scott Smith. And it was like, oh, he's coming back. Then he lands in Strikeforce. He goes 3-5 in Strikeforce. Some great fights, some great knockouts, but 3-5. And when the UFC bought Strikeforce and Robbie Lawler was suddenly back in the UFC, he was not supposed to do anything. He was almost like, yeah, this guy Robbie Lawler, he was like pretty cool back in the day. He still puts on these really entertaining fights. Who can we match him up against that's fun? And this man proceeded to win 8 of 9, beat Johnny Hendricks to become the UFC welterweight champion in a classic, defend it in an all-time classic against Rory McDonald with some of the greatest scenes that we've ever seen from a single fight ever, and then defend it in another classic against Carlos Condit. So, of course, he then did lose the belt to Tyron Woodley and picked up some losses from that point on, but that 9-fight run from the time that he returned to the UFC was one of the most out-of-nowhere, unexpected, and truly memorable runs that we will ever see in MMA. The man is a legend.
He is, man. Not the longest title reign, but 3 or 4 fight title reign. I think I said it last week, and I've said it before, and I'll say it one more time here, and I may say it again one day. My favorite title reign that I can even recall out of all the title reigns. In terms of punch for punch, pound for pound, you know, his second fight with Johnny Hendricks. By the way, that first fight was great too. Second fight with Johnny Hendricks. His rematch with Rory. One of the top, we could say top 5 greatest fights of all time. And then his fight with Carlos Condit wasn't much worse. Yep. I mean, those 2 fights right there back to back. Forget it, man. Forget it. Anyway.
He truly hit a point, which is crazy for a guy that was so up and down for so much of his career. But he truly hit a point where you would the fight would be, the guys would be walking out to the cage and you would feel like, fuck, man, this guy's got to get in a cage with Robbie Lawler right now.
Yeah.
Like, that's really what it felt like. Like, he just hit this point of being like this mythical, scary motherfucker.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that quote he talked about? I think somebody asked him about Conor. He was in an interview.
Ugh.
And somebody was like, I'm not
just
coming.
now?
No. A couple of years ago.
Oh.
And somebody was like, and he said, I'm not coming for your something. And the interviewer was like, what are you coming for? And he was like, your soul.
Oh, yeah, I do remember that.
I remember
now
that.
You say that. He had a funny one this weekend where they told, I guess Conor tweeted back by December with a picture of Robbie Lawler. And they told him that Conor had tweeted that he thought he'd like be back and he wasn't really retiring. And Robbie goes, no, well, I mean, why? Does Conor want to fight?
Yeah.
And he was like, because for that, maybe. So that gave me a little chuckle. But
like, I don't hate that. I'll be honest with you. That fight's kind of fun.
Yeah, hell yeah,
I don't
man.
need
That fight would be crazy.
I don't want to see either of them lose that fight. Yeah, let him go. This was awesome.
Man, give Robbie Lawler that one last bag, bro. Give him his red panty night, man.
All right, shall we move on? Let us now hop into our lightning round. If you don't know, our lightning round is where I challenge Mark and Omar to give me their lightningest takes, and then at the end, I award them with imaginary points that I've never done before. Who knows? We may do that one day. I don't know. Not today. It's kind of like whose line is it anyway?
Award you
like
no
points
points,
are just made up.
and may God have mercy on your soul.
All right, at a catch weight of 130 pounds, Tatsuro Taira gets it done by UD over Edgar Chairez. Mark, go first.
So that was not very good from Tatsuro Taira. I mean, that's not right. It was still very good. The grappling is absolutely dominant. He couldn't find a finish, but it won him the fight very clearly. So that was poor wording from me to start. But I did not love what I saw on the feet. I thought that he looked slow, indecisive, hittable in ways that he hasn't looked previously. So I don't know. It was short notice. Maybe it had something to do with that. I know he had cut weight previously. Now he had to cut it again. Obviously, they did make it 130, so you'd like to think that helped a bit. So I don't know. I don't want to overreact, but that was definitely the first time we have looked at Tatsuro Taira and we're like, damn, he doesn't look so good in this particular area. So we'll see. Obviously, he's super young and improving, so we will see, but worth noting.
Omar.
Yeah, I'd have to agree, man. The stand-up game was definitely a little sketchy. I think going forward, Taira probably is going to want to look into cleaning that aspect up more than anything. I think his ground game is pretty solid. Obviously, that was what he effectively won this fight off of. And Chairez looked like his striking was on point. I think that if Taira keeps going in there against guys with better and better striking, eventually he's going to get knocked out.
Okay, and the women's strawweight division, Denise Gomes defeats Yasmin Haragüe by TKO, 20 seconds of round number 1. Omar, what do you have to say?
It's hard for me to really take too much away from this because it happened so quickly. It happened off of the first exchange. Haragüe got caught and just Gomes swarmed her. And credit to Gomes for doing exactly what she needed to do in that position and took full advantage and came out on top fantastically. But I can't imagine if these two girls could fought like we've been saying, like, with some other fights now. If they fought 10 times, I can't imagine that Gomes wins more than what she just did. Maybe I'm not giving her the respect that she just earned as far as, that fight was concerned. But I just think Yasmin got caught, and I think that happens.
Mark?
Yeah, I mean, Denise Gomes wrecked Yasmin. That was fucking crazy. Like, we talked about Yasmin and how good her technique is, and we didn't get to see a single bit of it. 3 straight massive rights from Gomes to drop her and then pound her out on the ground. I mean, crazy win, crazy statement for the legitimacy of Gomes. Could it be one of these situations where if we get to actually see that fight play out, more often than not, maybe it doesn't go her way? It absolutely could, but she had that fight going away where she got her hand raised, and she got it raised dominantly.
In the light heavyweight division rematch, Alonzo Menifield, though, gets it done this time over Jimmy Crute by submission via guillotine in the second round. Mark, staying with you.
The first round here was kind of by the book. Menifield obviously faster and the harder hitter. Crute using the grappling to kind of muck it up. He couldn't get a takedown, but he was doing well in the clinch. Then round 2, Crute getting hit, but he's able to get a nice takedown. It was all kind of like going along the lines of the clash of styles that we expected to see. And then, bang, Alonzo friggin' Menifield with a standing guillotine that he snatches out of nowhere, almost rips Jimmy Crute's head off, and concludes the 2-fight series in monster fashion.
Omar.
Yeah, like we were talking about last week, I couldn't see Jimmy Crute somehow finding the ability to beat Alonzo Menifield in this fight. Even the takedowns that Crute was able to land and things like that, you could see the amount of effort he put into into those moments, into those sequences, weren't getting him the payout that I think that they were worth. Menifield was able to get up, he was able to kind of counter wrestle with him, and then land big shots on Crute. I think once we got to the point where that choke happened, I think Crute was just trying to panic wrestle a little bit too much, and he paid for it.
All right, the feature bout on the early prelims in the light heavyweight division as well. Vitor Petrino defeats Marcin Prachnio by submission in the third round. Omar, take it.
Dog, Vitor Petrino is terrifying. Prachnio was trying to hit this man for the entire fight, and Petrino just kept putting up his hands like, what are you doing? That's it? And just kept walking forward. And it got to a point where I think Prachnio just drowned. He was doing a lot of good volume on the feet. There were obviously some good connections from Prachnio, but the ground game is really where he ended up really shitting the bed. And Petrino's forward movement eventually just got to a point where Prachnio couldn't maintain that kind of pace for the entire round. Prachnio gets him down to the ground in the second round, works him quite a little bit, and then we get back down there in the third round, and it was pretty much all she wrote. And I love listening. I love seeing guys do the answer the phone with the arm triangle, because it's not a super great defense anymore, because especially guys like Vitor Petrino, or even guys like Hobo Cop, guys that are gigantic, they're just gonna squeeze your arm into your neck. You're fucked. You've got to find a different way to get out of that, because the telephone thing is not. It's not the way. It's not what I would rely on to get out of that position.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mark,
the number one takeaway from this fight, and if you have a different takeaway, you are lying, is that Vitor Petrino is a fucking specimen.
Yeah.
That man is a cyborg. He's a bit raw. He doesn't move his head as much as you'd like defensively, but there's some potential to be unlocked there, because he is a physical monster. He carries natural power, and he's got some grappling chops on him. So I know that was only his first sub, but you can see the potential there. A nice win for him, and he's now 2-0 in the UFC.
all right, in the flyweight division, Jesus Santos Aguilar defeats... Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm skipping over Simon. In the bantamweight division, Cameron Simon defeats Terrence Mitchell by TKO in the very first round. Mark, take it.
Cameron Simon is good, man. The way he snatched up that deep guillotine early, then he went armbar from bottom to create separation and get back to his feet. Then he goes to the clinch and ends up dragging Mitchell down to the mat. Works to a dominant position, range shots for TKO. I mean, it was 3 minutes, and he showed off every single aspect of MMA you can show off. So, well done from him. He is a talented dude.
Omar.
Yeah, I think the thing that I loved about watching Simon fight is, like Mark mentioned, his ability to use his submission attempts to get better position. That is something we do not see enough of in MMA. There's too many guys that are fucking content to be on the bottom, go for leg locks while getting their faces smashed, and so on and so forth. Simon is the kind of guy who will chain his submission attempts together, and if he knows he's not going to get it, and he knows he's not going to get it, like really knows, because guys who fucking do jiu-jitsu should know when that submission attempt is done and doesn't work anymore.
Especially
but
in
still
an
holds
MMA
the position,
context.
uses it to reverse the position 100%. And it's I think he's showing the real way that I think you should be using Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in an MMA fight. And he still ends up with a nasty finish in a TKO. I mean, by the time it was all said and done, Mitchell had basically been put through a washing machine and just got destroyed. It was a beautiful performance from Cameron Simon, and you can't help but want to see more of him.
All right, in the flyweight division, Jesus Santos Aguilar defeats Shannon Ross by knockout at 17 seconds of the very first round. Omar, give us a quick take for this quick finish.
I mean, if you're Shannon Ross, next time, keep your hands up. If you're Jesus Santos Aguilar, keep doing what you're doing. I mean, he threw one goddamn punch in that fight for the most part. So it was a great performance from him. That's the kind of statement you want to make when you're coming into the UFC. But Shannon Ross got to keep them hands up. I don't know what that was.
Mark?
Yeah, not a lot to break down here. Aguilar came out hot. He threw a massive overhand right. Shannon Ross's hands were down, and he went all the way to sleep. But that's a massive KO for a flyweight.
Yeah.
And a huge win for Aguilar, who had dropped his debut. And now he gets a nice initial UFC win.
Okay, last one. In the lightweight division, Esteban Ribovic defeats Camuela Kirk by UD Marco.
This fight was kind of like a tale of three parts. Round one was all Camuela Kirk, absolutely dominant in the grappling. Ribovic couldn't do anything except survive. Then round two, Ribovic kind of starts stuffing some takedowns. We get extended exchanges on the feet that are back and forth. And then with like a minute left in round two, Ribovic drops Kirk and then drops him again. And from that point on, it really just became Kirk kind of just battling and trying to survive the onslaught. And he did battle. Props to both of these guys. Really good fight, but it was Ribovic who racked up the damage and who was the more impressive fighter here. So a nice W for him.
Omar, take us home.
Yeah, man. Honestly, this fight really had fight of the night written all over it. There were a lot of obvious, competitors for that title that night. But, I mean, goddamn, this was the first fight of the night, and these two boys went at it. And, I mean, this was very back and forth. And by the time you got to the third round, I mean, these guys were putting a beating on each other. And it really came down to Ribovic just not deterring from the firefight and pushing forward. Even when he was getting hit in these wild-ass exchanges, he was never moving backwards. He was continuously moving forwards. And I think that in the end, that was really what got Kirk. And Ribovic ended up with a beautiful performance in round two and round three. I thought it was great.
All right, boys, that does it for our breakdowns of UFC 290, Volkanovski versus Rodriguez.